It's just doing its spinny wheel thing. And then
We're here.
we're here. I can't even see us. Welcome, everyone. I hope that you can hear us. Welcome. It's Friday. It's September. It is in the middle of eclipse season. Okay. Yes, I think we're off and running. Britt, you're more organized than me today.
I do my best.
You do your best. You're doing a great job. Thank you. So it is Kelly from Kelly's Astrology. I'm back with Britt, who is joining me for another monthly Q&A. So if you are following along or catching us here, we look forward to spending a little time with you over the next half hour or so. I know we're in the middle of eclipse season. I'm really thinking a lot about how September 2025 eclipse season is like very South Node vibes because the sun is with the South Node. And so we've got that as an undertone. So welcome, Britt. How are you doing today? Dare we ask?
I'm okay. Yeah, I'm definitely feeling the middle of eclipse season, dare I say. It's that time of year where, we're feeling that, especially now that knowing that the sun is with the south node. I feel like it's a great time to do the Marie Kondoing of our lives,
Oh my gosh, yes.
but also a time where maybe, given that the sun is also one of the primary planets we associate with, vitality, just the light, like it makes sense that I hear from many people that they are a bit tired. And yeah,
Yes.
that's on point.
That's on point, isn't it? I know because there's so many interpretations of the South Node, and in like the Hellenistic or ancient Greek astrology, it's just this concept of decrease. And I think
Hmm.
it's so simple and it can be extrapolated out in so many ways. Like things that are decreasing or being reduced, or, if we go into some of the Indian mythology, the nodes are connected to the celestial dragon, and the south node is the lower half of the dragon. So it's sort of that, it's like the belly emotional part, but it's also the part of the dragon or a creature that would be about elimination or like purging, that idea of removal of waste. And I think when we come into the south node, it's a little bit more of like a clearing out energy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
So
really
you're
interesting.
in that zone.
I've been doing like a lot of work behind the scenes on my website, and I spent all of Mercury retrograde in Leo for that. And so I started Mercury in Virgo with a full to-do list. And slowly it's like
Yes.
things are ticking off, which is really nice. But then there's always new stuff that comes on the list. So I'm also very aware of that, of like, okay, what, and also I think with South Node, the question of like what really matters, right?
Yes.
What is something that we can let go of and that we can purge? Because there's
Yes.
always, accumulation on the other end of that. So
Yeah.
balancing those two out is,
Absolutely. Yeah. And as much as we have this South Node season, which is, kind of September 25 this year, we do have North Node season, which was, I think, March from memory when we had the sun with the North Node in Pisces. And that's about increase. And it is more about accumulation or ambition or, striving. And this is the balancing or the counteracting. And so
Mm,
it's not just like decreasing or emptying out of things that maybe you really need or that you want to hold on to. It's kind of like a clearing where there has become like excess or chaos, or where things
yeah.
are now, that idea of like diminishing returns is something I think a lot about with the South Node, where maybe you were very efficient and organized with something and things have slipped, and we have to like drop a few things so we can get back to that more kind of streamlined experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's and I know like this, we're recording this on the 12th of September, and over the last 48 hours we've had the sun and then Mercury, which is the ruler of the sun and the ruler of the south node, both go over the south node. So yeah, I think Britt, you were saying like the sun is about physical vitality, and so that like physical weariness, and of course Mercury is about our mindset and our mental state, and having that be maybe more fraught or more tired. That
Mhm.
idea of, you get to a stretch of time and you sort of think, "Oh, I just can't think anymore. I just can't take in any more information, or I can't make any more decisions." I know I'm prone to that just based on my natal chart stuff, and I always I'm very aware of that when Mercury is with the South Node. You mentioned your checklist though, Britt, and I was like, that's a lovely thing to be clearing out, like that we can
Mm-hmm.
use the South Node for. What are the things that we're just like powering through that are then off
Yeah.
the to-do list or released? Because I think that idea of releasing or putting out in the world is a sometimes can be a more useful expression of the South
Yeah.
Node.
Yeah, and I'm really thinking now these days about like beginnings and endings. Also knowing
Mm,
that there's the Kazemi moment happening tomorrow, right? So there's that seeding point where Mercury conjuncts the sun and is in the heart of the sun. So there's also a real potential for new plans and new ideas. And at the same time, the South Node is there. So there's like a lot about the cyclical nature of time and the beginnings and
mm.
endings being kind of one part of the same, same spiral, if you will.
Yes, I love that. I love that we're always focused on the beginning or the gaining or the increasing, but sometimes we forget that we can't just keep adding in. If you
Mhm.
think about even just physically, we can't just keep stuffing food in our mouth. At some point, we have to pause, we have to chew, we have to digest
Yeah.
it. And our whole lives are like that we do have to stop the intake for a period of time and maybe digest or process or integrate what's already here. Sometimes that requires us to make a few decisions. And I think that's a little bit of this like Mercury South Node bit.
Hmm.
It's like, what do I just maybe need to step away from? And then to your point, the Kazemi coming up on the 13th, it's such a potent Kazemi, like Mercury conjunct the Sun in Virgo, which is arguably the most technically helpful or best sign for
Yeah.
Mercury, while they're both just coming off this sextile to Jupiter. And
Hmm.
so there is this sense of, you could think of it as like a renewal or a rebirth for Mercury. Kind of, it's not exactly the same as sort of a new moon theme, but that symbolism of Mercury being refreshed and reset. And so, if we want to bring those new things in, how are we making space for the new things to land? I always think of the garden. I always want to buy more plants, but if I have no space, then where are they going to
Right.
go?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's also, such a great time to really listen, especially with the
Mm.
Kazemi. You've probably used this image before. It's just in my mind with like that image of Mercury being on the king's throne, right? And just listening to
Yes.
like the divine counsel, like what is the latest, divine inspiration that's coming through this Kazemi moment. And there's something really beautiful about using this transit of knowing that we're in eclipse season and there's a lot on our plates, and then we have this seeding point, this moment with the Mercury Cazimi, where we can just listen to what inspires us and what propels us forward, which is a really potent time. And with listening, I really mean like listening with five senses, right? So a whole full body, you know, Mercury in an earth sign kind of listening.
I love like that somatic type of approach of really taking in at all levels, not just the words, but the felt kind of embodied sense. And I
Hmm.
love that idea of the listening. You know, we often think about doing with it, like, the way we live in modern culture is a lot about what do I do? What action do I take? Where's the movement? And we forget that sometimes the germination of ideas or even accessing wisdom which can guide future action, that these things happen often in stillness or in silence or
Yeah.
in the quiet moments of repose or reflection. And I love a Mercury Cazimi for that reminder of like going within.
Hmm.
And you talked about Mercury being with like, with the king and its throne. I also love the idea of like the solar energy as like the sacred deity, and Mercury has
Hmm.
gone to the sanctuary, to the temple of the deity.
Yes.
Isn't that a beautiful? That's totally from Demetra George, one of my dear teachers. I can't claim to have come up with
Yeah.
that myself, but I
Yeah.
love the way it's like Mercury is paying homage or it's doing devotional
Hmm.
practice right now. And it is important for Mercury to do that periodically so that Mercury stays in touch with intention or motivation or those sort of higher aspirational
Hmm.
divine clues and guidance. And that this second weekend in September, which is also the between the eclipses weekend, gives us a chance to maybe step back or to get quiet. Maybe there are some seeds that are planted. And if we understand, just the very simple, like planting a tomato seed, you put the seed in the ground and you tend to it with no response or activity for a period of time. And then over time, there's small amounts of activity, when the little shoot finally comes up above ground. And after even more time, there might be a flower or a small little cherry tomato or something. And I think sometimes we're so impatient in modern
Yeah.
life. And I love the visual symbolism of some of the planetary, the phases and their cycles, reminding us it's okay to pull back. It's okay to
Yeah.
pause. It's okay to get still for a while, that we don't have to be constantly outputting, if you like.
Hmm. Yeah, such a great reminder. Yeah, and what you mentioned about, it just reminded me of, I think back in the ancient day with the oracle, right? You
Yes.
went to the oracle, you heard something, and then you had to walk back and listen to what came into your head. And I feel like that's Mercury Cazimi at its peak,
Mm.
right? Just like that walk back from going to the oracle and listening to what comes up in your head as you're doing that. Yeah.
That is so beautiful, Britt. It really is that sense of like the oracle will speak to you in wisdom that may require some contemplation or some mulling over for it to fully make sense. I
Yeah.
love this. And this is just reminding me actually of something I wanted to make sure I said in our show today is that we are doing the once a year intake for the full Kelly's Astrology training program. It is happening right now. If you sign up before September 20th, you can save hundreds of dollars off your tuition because we run a special bundle price just for these 2 weeks in September. So if you'd like more details, pop over to kellysastrology.com. There'll just be a bar on the screen. You can click straight through to the page. And so basically, sign up by the 20th of September if you're interested to learn astrology, to interpret a chart, to understand how to do predictive astrology, and if you want to build your skills to be able to share astrology with others. So that's something that's happening right now. You will see me inside the course, of course. You'll also see Britt, who is one of my wonderful teaching assistants who helps me with some of the Q&As and the coursework. So if you've got any questions, you can also reach out to students@kellysastrology.com. And of course, we'll leave the link in the show notes below for that. But something about Mercury being Cazimi reminded me, it just turned my little brain on. I was like, okay, okay.
Excellent. It needed to be said.
Yes, yes. Oh, love it. Love it. Okay, so I know we're sort of thinking about, September and what's ahead, and we've kind of dived in with right where we are at the moment. Some planets on the South Node coming up to that Mercury Cazimi, the Sun in Virgo. Are there other things you've got on your radar over the next few weeks, Britt, that you are kind of really focused on or looking at as being important?
Well, there's a lot happening, right? I mean, never a dull moment with astrology, but
Not
yeah,
at the
definitely.
moment, right?
Mercury is definitely busy. Aside from the Cazimi moment, there will be an opposition with Saturn. There will
Mm.
be the opposition with the ingress into Libra. Then we get a whole bunch of outer planet activity. So Mercury's definitely busy. Of course, we have the solar eclipse coming up. Mars is going to be square Pluto. As it has entered Scorpio, and then somewhere in between, you also have Venus moving into Virgo. So there's a lot shifting.
It's really it feels like the second half of September is like, oh my goodness, it's everything.
Hmm.
This Mercury, you mentioned Mercury opposite Saturn, and I think that is a really important and maybe underrated or underlooked. Like, people are just like, there's other things I want to talk about. Mercury is really strong by sign in Virgo, but an opposition to Saturn always highlights necessities, those
Hmm.
things that are not fun. They may not even be urgent, but they are important. They're important in the long term, scheme of our lives. They might speak to important structural or foundation elements in our lives. These can be to do with health, financial planning, professional planning, family planning. And I really see that Mercury opposite Saturn opposition. So it's September 17, maybe the 18th, depending on where you are. Mercury's at the tail end of Virgo, 28 Virgo, and Saturn is just come back into the tail end of Pisces. And I actually, this to me is one of those aspects that has been building since the start of September.
Mm.
You know, Saturn retrograded back into Pisces on September 1st. Mercury came in heading forward into Virgo on the 2nd, and they've just been moving towards each other since
Yeah.
then.
Yeah.
So September 17 to me feels a little bit like we have lots of crazy sayings and phrases in Australia, and some of them, you know, have swear words in them. So I'm going to try and find the PG version for this one. But the PG version is put your money where your mouth is. You know,
Hmm.
the idea that if it is really important to you, how are you going to back yourself in that choice? Are you going to decline a few things so the one thing that's really important can get your full attention? And a very simple way that I, you know, try to help people understand aspects with Saturn, our attention is often called to a big no that we need to say. A no to ourselves, a no to someone else. Sometimes it's a firm no, just no. Other times it's a not right now, or I'd like to, but I need more time. So whether it's like a no, whether it's a delay, whether it's a denial, whether it's a delegation, that Mercury Saturn is like, I don't really want to have to grapple with this decision, but I must. It's necessary. I can't put it off any longer. You know, and I remember listening to the writer Elizabeth Gilbert speak a couple of years ago, and she talked about, you know, people wanting to be creative and how they could, you know, support their creativity. And one thing she said is it's not just getting good at saying no to the things you don't want to do. You actually have to get better at saying no to the things that you would like to do, but are going to take up so much precious time or energy. And so, you know, I think about that a lot when I'm like, oh, should I do this writing project or should I go and have lunch for a friend? And it's like, I want to do both, but I can't. And, you know, it's sort of reminding us that sometimes we have to sit out some of the fun stuff for now if those
Mm.
longer goals are going to get enough energy and care to grow into something we can be really proud of over time. So I love that you brought that aspect up because I know there is a lot happening as we head into that third week of September. But that
Yeah.
really, to me, I think it's going to bring each of us to a pretty important turning point.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love the keyword like time management for this aspect. It's
So
so
beautiful.
key. And then I'm thinking of Mercury and Virgo being so good at tweaking and being super precise. When you speak about like saying no, you know, what comes up for me just as an addition is like, okay, what are the conditions under which I can say yes to this? Or what does it have to look like? You know, just being very
Mm,
precise about, look, what is it exactly that I'm trying to do here and how can I
yes.
get that laser point, you know?
I love
That
it. Laser point so Mercury and Virgo.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's it can be a helpful aspect to really clue yourself in on that, like what that looks like.
I think that's so good. Yeah. What is it that we're really trying to do here? And I think that's sometimes the balance between both Mercury and Saturn and also Pisces and Virgo. You know, Mercury and Virgo, of course, can really get into the weeds and the details. And Saturn is sometimes like, it wasn't about doing this little thing perfectly. It was about doing this thing reasonably well so this larger thing can proceed. Or, you know, sometimes with Pisces, Virgo, Pisces is like, remember there was a vision we were chasing
Hmm.
here. And so this was a step towards that. So we don't want to, you know, totally fuss over this thing when it's one piece of a larger whole. The symbolism is so beautiful. And then you kind of identified, Britt, I think what is perhaps we could say some of the most maybe dramatic type of astrology that we have kind of condensed over a 5 day period, September 20th to September 24. Venus square Uranus, Sun opposite Saturn, the solar eclipse in Virgo, Mars and the Sun change signs, and then we have Mars square Pluto. And
Hmm.
it does feel like and because the Venus, Uranus, and Mars Pluto squares are happening with outer planets in new places, Pluto in Aquarius, Uranus in Gemini, to me, it really feels like we're starting to bump up against some of the changes that are needed for the next era. You know, not
Yeah.
just, oh, this is Mars Pluto and there's some power themes. This is Mars square Pluto in a new place. And we're still learning about what are the things we're going to be passionate about or angry about, or how are we going to do the fighting piece with Pluto in Aquarius? What will be our weapons? What will be the way we defend ourselves? And I think this is going to be kind of very revelatory, that whole period.
Hmm.
So it's so interesting. Yeah, like when you mentioned that, I'm like, there is really a lot happening in that time frame.
Yep, for sure. Yeah, and I love that. I love that approach of like, yeah, all the outer planets are in new places, right? I mean, Pluto has been in Aquarius for some time, but only has recently stayed there for the time
Yes.
being. So all of these, you know, these aspects from like the faster moving planets will tell us something about the larger story that's going on.
Absolutely. And yeah, I mean, I think Pluto would probably be coming up on a little over 2 years of Pluto kind of going in and out of Aquarius, but it still feels so new. Like Pluto's still
Hmm.
only at one Aquarius, and it is yeah, it's like we know Mars Pluto is about power themes, like the clash of power, the collective versus the individual. There's also that idea of what am I willing to fight for or fight against?
Yeah.
And that can come up obviously on all levels in our personal lives. It's like, am I shifting my own allegiances, my own loyalties? Am I reclaiming some power in a situation where I felt like I really didn't have control? So there's a
Hmm.
lot of those very subtle but very profound negotiations in the interpersonal space. And of course, we see it play out collectively with how our organizations or entities like countries or businesses handling conflict and friction between each other, if you like. It's certainly doesn't feel easy and smooth, but it does
Hmm.
feel like it may be necessary to engage in more uncomfortable or testy type of situations.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, those power dynamics are a lot. Okay, and if anybody has any questions, you are welcome to drop them in the chat. Of course, Britt and I can probably babble on about astrology for days, but we certainly can answer any questions if anyone does have any. Is there anything coming through in the chat, Britt, that you want to take a little look at or that we should address?
Well, there's one question from Rivers about the astrology program. If it's life
Sure.
training, maybe that's good to answer.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, yes, my Kelly's Astrology training program class starts on September 22nd. So, we're doing our very special bundle price registration, which is open right now. The classes are the course or the program, it is a mix of some pre-recorded videos and some live Q&A discussions. And so let me tell you a little bit more about the structure. The classes themselves are pre-recorded, so you can watch them on your own schedule. We find that gives students lots of flexibility. It also helps us accommodate students who are all over the globe because we do have students in varying places. And then every 2 weeks during class session, we come together, usually on a Wednesday, for live Q&A. And so I'll be in the live Q&As. We have a moderator who joins us, Erin, most of the time, who is wonderful. And usually the teaching assistant associated with the course will be there as well. So sometimes you'll see Britt, sometimes you'll see Larry or Michael or John. So we have a few teaching assistants that will join us, and we get to spend a good, well, it's 3 hours over two Q&As, and then 2 weeks later we get together again for another two 90-minute Q&As. Now, for the program, there's more to it than just, the class and the Q&A. There is also supplementary reading material. There is a private student discussion forum where students can post questions anytime that are responded to. And students do have some homework activities, which they will get personal feedback on. And that is a really unique thing about our program. It is something I feel very passionately about. And what it means is that you get a lot of support to help guide you through the material. Learning astrology is magical, it can be life changing. And at times, there are moments when it can feel overwhelming because you are learning on so many levels. There's philosophy, there's energetic awareness, and of course, there's the practical technical skills that you're learning as well. So I really put together a program that was not just rich in knowledge, that is going to give you skills that you can use to share astrology with others, but also to make sure you had lots of support and lots of those touchstone moments where you can interact with, myself and the teaching assistants so that you can get any guidance that you might need. So I think that's kind of a good overview, Rivers, but if there's more that you need, let us know. We do have our Q&As at varying times of the day. The schedule is set in advance, and I might actually grab that schedule for you all now and just drop it in the chat, but you can find it on the Kelly's Astrology homepage if you just go to Learn Astrology, and it is in the top of that page. I'm just going to grab a couple of those links for people now. And so we do have a lot of fun. We do have Q&As at different times so that we can also accommodate students around the globe, because we do have students everywhere, basically. So yeah, hopefully that's helpful. Is there anything I should add there, Britt? Anything you can think of in addition to that?
Well, just to speak to the homework and the discussion forum component, because that makes the program so special. It's really like, you can learn a lot about astrology from watching YouTube or from browsing the internet, but it's really when you put it in practice and you start like really putting the work of interpretation in, then and you get the feedback on that, then you really start to grow as an astrologer. And especially because, there's only a few teaching assistants, we get to also witness and monitor the growth of our students. So I sometimes encounter students in a planet course and then see them again in the moon phases course and be like, oh wow, you've grown so much, and I see this thing that you've struggled with, you're now tackling, and it's really, that's the guidance and support is truly unique and super helpful if you're passionate about astrology and actually putting it to practice.
It's such a good point, Britt, because I do think there's so much astrology information out on in the internet these days. Not all of it's good quality information. Not all of it is organized in like the best learning pathway, which is, of course, another advantage of taking a structured program like this. I've taken everything that has worked for me in more than 20 years of client practice, and I've put it together in such a way that we start at a place that's more accessible, and then we build on that and we get more complex as we go, kind of like very step by step. But the key thing that I think you're addressing, Britt, that is so important that you don't get just by listening to astrology content is that learning is an active process. You have to do something with the knowledge to actually embody it, to integrate it within yourself, for it to be wisdom that is your wisdom, if you like.
Mm.
And so we give students lots of opportunities to do that through the homework. There's written exercises, there's also some activities, and we have lots of a chance to like get into the ways that astrology might show up in real life. And, we inside my program, because my background, I do have a traditional astrology orientation in the style of astrology I practice. And I am also a trained counselor. And so it's this really unique intersection of helping people with astrology, having that awareness of emotion and human behavior, but also the kind of really grounded, structured approach with astrology. So we do have a lot of fun in class, and we do have an installment payment plan kind of thing. We also have a one-time payment, and both of those options are available at this special price just until September 20th. So yeah, if you'd like to see both myself and Britt inside class, we'd love to have you there. And if anybody
Absolutely.
has any other questions, you're welcome to drop them below and we can get them answered. Any other quick questions? I feel like there's one or two that maybe we could look at, Britt.
Yeah,
Yeah?
there's one from Stefania, who says, my husband starts an eighth house profection year.
Mm-hmm.
Jupiter enters his eighth, Leo, in 26, so that's next year. And I also have Jupiter in my solar return eighth, as well as North Node eclipses in my natal eighth. What should we expect? So there's, I feel, two different charts that we're talking about, a
Yes.
husband chart and a native chart. Yeah.
Yeah. Jupiter in my solar return. I mean, in some ways, I'm like, yes, we've got the husband's chart and then Stefania's chart and a lot about the eighth house. I mean, I think the piece that really feels rich to me is when, Stefania, you're asking about your husband. and sharing that he's going into an eighth house profection year. So I think let's just start with some eighth house themes. What is the eighth house about? The eighth house is a part of the chart that I always feel has two very distinct sides to it. It has this very practical financial side to it. And so sometimes when people are in an eighth house year, there are matters pertaining to taxes or joint finances, loans, financial obligations, sometimes inheritances, sometimes that very practical piece of how are we managing money within our partnership can be all part of the eighth house perfection year. And then the other side of the eighth house is that maybe more psychological, emotional piece where one might be called to attend more deeply to their internal landscape. What are the things that I have had some fear or worry around, and how will I get to know them better or get some healing or support around those pieces? So there can be some of those topics that all come up around the eighth house. But one thing you mentioned, Stefania, which I think is really maybe a blessing, is that your husband will be perfecting into his eighth house. It sounds like that's Leo. And while he is in his eighth house perfected Leo year, we will have transiting Jupiter come into there. And that's obviously a great boon. Jupiter can be helpful or expansive or uplifting. And so, if there were any of those psychological elements, Jupiter coming into the eighth place, especially while it's perfected, the perfected place of the year, could be very helpful for getting healing or gaining wisdom about mindset or motivation or the origins of fear. And of course, the financial sides of the eighth house can also be helped out by Jupiter. Maybe you're trying to, get approved for a loan for something, or maybe there's this discussion about, is there someone who's going to provide some financial help to you or your husband? So these are some of the things I would think about with those pieces. What about you, Britt? Is there anything you would speak to there?
Well, one of my favorite keywords for the eighth house that I think encapsulates a lot of what you've already discussed is interdependence. It's where
Beautiful.
we are confronted with the fact that we are, we're not just on our own in our own little island. We share stuff with other people, whether that's material or more mental or emotional. And so with Jupiter in that house, I think there's a lot about the wisdom and the growth that we
Mm,
can go through by remembering that we are, mutually interdependent. We are interdependent, and we have to rely on each other and take care of each other. It's just a
yeah.
nice reminder, I
I
think.
love it. It's such a beautiful piece, Britt. And I know you have that background in therapy and healing as well. And that's a lovely way of viewing the eighth house as the areas of our life that intersect with others, where we can be like reflecting on how to have a lot of integrity, because I think that's a great Jupiter word too. Have a lot of integrity about how we're sharing what we all need, essentially.
Yeah.
Okay, I can see lots of questions about eclipses. Before we dive into those, I can see one question, which I know you answered in the chat, Brett, that I might answer just on the video. Truth and Beauty was asking, how long will students have access to recorded training? So this is about the Kelly's Astrology training program, which is doing our once a year bundle intake now. Students have lifetime access to the courses, which means you can take extra time if you need them. It also means if you want to revisit the material down the track, you are welcome to do that. Learning astrology is, I would say, it's totally life changing. It's the kind of subject matter where you will always get more out of revisiting material. And
Mhm.
so absolutely, once you've, paid to enter the program, you can stay in there as long as you want. The program is structured so that we have kind of like intensive learning blocks and then we have break periods. So there are some, structured breaks throughout the program where if you're going at a slightly slower pace, you can catch up. And of course, we do understand that, some people want to move really quickly and you can do that. And other people need a little bit more digesting time or they're just managing life and study. So there is a fair amount of flexibility. We do have that through line of the schedule of the live Q&As, and many students find that's very helpful for kind of keeping them on a rhythm with their studies. Even if they're not fully up to date with all their coursework, coming to the Q&As is really helpful, just so that you can also like tap into that community feeling. It's a structured program, but there's a lot of support, and coming to the live Q&As, even if you're, a little behind where the material might be, it's very, very valuable, very rich use of your time. And Truth and Beauty is just clarifying the 20th is the due date to sign up. Yeah. So the special bundle offer where you'll save quite a few $100s off the tuition fee, that expires at midnight on the 20th of September. So do sign up before then so that you get the best price. And then class starts on the 22nd. Okay, so hopefully that's the pieces there. Is there any one of these eclipse nodal questions that really grabs you, Britt, and we can answer that?
Well, there's a few, maybe the last one. So this is from Debbie, who says, I'm a Pisces rising. Can the South Node eclipse in the seventh house bring a new important relationship rather than just endings?
Great question. The theory of the South Node is that it is more about emptying out. And so there's a couple of pieces to my response here, Debbie. So we could end up in a different place than what you're expecting. So the most kind of straightforward interpretation of the South Node eclipse in the seventh is, what is it that we need to kind of release around relationships? Now, that may or may not mean the end of a relationship. That's one of the expressions of that. Another way this could show up is a person like yourself, Debbie, or someone else with Pisces rising who's having this Virgo South Node seventh house eclipse. You might realize there's something you're doing that is contributing to a dissatisfying experience within a relationship. And what is being ended or released is that habit or that attitude or behavior. We're talking Virgo here. So not just for Debbie, but for everybody. Some of the things we're kind of processing through with these South Node in Virgo activations, including the eclipse, is, where am I stuck in my mind to my own detriment? Where are my thoughts getting away from me that I'm suffering as a result? So where am I worrying about things outside of my control? Where am I getting overly anxious about things? And how can I better like calm myself or have some of these really simple daily rituals so that my mind is less agitated, if you like? So there's some pieces about, we could have this concept of endings around relationship. It may be that your partner has a habit that drives you nuts, and there's a discussion about how could we change that habit or minimize it, or you do that thing and I don't have to be a part of it. There's lots of ways that clearing out energy of the South Node could come through. I always love the connection between the physical and the emotional and energetic. And so physically clearing something of a seventh house nature, if there is a lot of baggage from past relationships, physical mementos, how do we remove those? If there are physical stuff from early, if you're in a long relationship, you accumulate a lot of relationship clutter, what could we get rid of? Do you have photos of your current relationship that are 10 years old? And could we update those with photos that are more recent so that we have more of the reflected energy of now? So there's all of those pieces where I think the South Node seventh house can be about the ending. Also keep in mind the seventh house, all of us instinctively go to the love relationship, but the seventh house is also one-on-one professional partnerships. And so people might have a change or a shift in a business association relationship. Or if you're a practitioner working with clients, it may be there is a bit more turnover with the kind of clients you're working with. So there's a few ways that South Node seventh house piece could come up. The other side of that is, of course, that if we're having South Node eclipses in the seventh, it means we're also having North Node eclipses in the first house. And funnily enough, I see lots of very strong first house activations when people are developing significant relationships. And I think that really speaks to how relationships are a very unique way to explore personal growth, self-development, and really clarify the essence of who we are. And so while the South Node seventh house might be like, there is something that we want to clear out here, the North Node Pisces eclipse, which was early earlier this month, September 7th or 8th, depending on where you are, that may be pushing you towards new associations or different partnerships that are bringing forward maybe latent or not fully expressed pieces of your personality. So that's a lot there, Debbie, but they're all the thoughts that I had for that question. What about you, Britt? Is there anything that you would add in to this idea of Debbie's question?
Well, I like to think about the fact that yes, this is an eclipse on the south node, and all of this is true that you've said, and also it is a solar eclipse, meaning it's a new moon that is eclipsed. So there is something about, having to let go of an old identity or something
Mm,
that you've carried with you that you've no that doesn't really serve you in terms of relationships that can maybe become a seeding point for something new to emerge eventually. And I think we're coming back to the beginning of this conversation about the spiral kind of, the seed
yes.
being carrying already, the fruit carrying the seed and that turning into a new fruit and, et cetera, et cetera. We could go
Absolutely, absolutely. That we can't like the seed grows the fruit and then the tree dies and the fruit disintegrates, but the seed is in it and that will be what comes forward next year.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Something about beginnings and endings being very much, part of the same process. So in a
Yeah.
way, just to add that, like it's not impossible. And I really like that angle of, a North Node eclipse in the first house can often, bring a new relationship that is more centered around what matters to you and what is, is in line with your motivations and your, um, yeah, what you want to get out of this life. So it can definitely show up that way.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really beautiful piece too there, Britt, because you're sort of linking so much of what Debbie's saying together around, sometimes we are in relationships and, whether it's an intimate romantic partnership, a professional association, sometimes even our super close friendships like have a touch of that seventh house quality to them. And we may be kind of stuck in an old but familiar pattern that doesn't really reflect who we are. And that shift of the relationship maybe getting quieter or just taking a pause, or even if it does end, sometimes that gives you the space to grow how you need to grow and then go towards the relationships for the next stage. I love how you pulled all that together, Brett. So beautiful. Oh, well, we could talk to you all for days, but we just wanted to jump in for our once a month kind of check in here. Britt, I know you have a lot going on with your astrology, and I know people would love to hear more about how they can connect with you for consults or mentoring. So let us know where people can find you and what you've got going on.
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. As of this month, I have relaunched my website, so you can now find me on somaticastrology.co. And I do astrology consults, I do astrology coaching, somatic coaching. I am open to mentoring at this moment, so people can apply for that, and it's not something that I'm really advertising anywhere, but I'm open for that as well. Mostly my type of style of astrology is about really bringing astrology down to earth and into the body. So it's about astrology that you can feel and something that's not just a heady intellectual exercise, but something that's really felt and
Mm.
lived in your body. So that's my approach to astrology, and you can find me at somaticastrology.co.
I love that, Britt, and how wonderful to launch with this Virgo themes, which are so much about, bringing the mind and awareness into the body. So on point. I love
Yeah.
it. Thank you. And of course, we've mentioned the Kelly's Astrology Training Program is on once a year intake right now until September 20th. So pop over to kellysastrology.com to find out more and to save hundreds of dollars off your tuition. If you've got questions, you can reach out to students at kellysastrology.com and they will definitely be able to help you. We'll put all the details, Britt's website, and the course sign up page below so you can get all the info you need. Thanks again for joining me today,
Thank
Britt.
you. Thank you. It was such a pleasure as
It was
always.
so fun. I know. And thank you all for watching along, for posting your questions and joining in the discussion. And we look forward to seeing you next month. Until then, everyone, take care.
Bye.
Bye.